Welcome, everybody, to our year in review for 2023. We're looking at the Star Wars CCG market as a whole. So, sort of the macro view. We did the Q4, which is more intended for the last 3 months. This video is going to go over set prices and some single prices and sort of where we're at in the market for last year. And at the end, we'll kind of make some prognoses as well about perhaps where things are going in 2024 and sort of chat a little bit about the market writ large. But I'm joined once again by Professor Greg, recently off the defense of his dissertation. So,
when my thanks, Matt. It's funny, when I started teaching this past fall, and my students started calling me professor. There was like a lag at first. The first couple months, it took me, a little bit like, oh, you're talking to me, huh?
Well, I want to make sure you get your correct honorific here. You didn't go to 8 years of evil medical school to be called Mister, right?
That's right. You call me Dr. Professor, please.
Yeah, do it like the German way. Herr Professor Dr. Greg. So we have a slide deck, guys. We're going to kind of go over some set sales, and we'll also talk whether sets are even a great way to track this. Both of us were chatting before about how maybe sets aren't even a great thing to track as much because a lot of people have completed their sets. But let's get into it a little bit, Greg. Take it away from here.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, I will still in the foreseeable future be tracking sets and these singles because, this is just something I'm passionate about and interested in. But yeah, it is an interesting question to what degree set sales are as a reliable indicator of the market as they used to be. But here's the first image is, I think, just like basically a mini window into 2023. What you're looking at here is the total average sum of all black border sets, not including AI, not including foils. I do this just because the AI and the foils, we get such small sample sizes that this is just like, I think, a better chart to start with. And you can see in terms of the average price, there's a little trend line up throughout the course of 2023. Not incredibly significant. We're looking at like $4,500 average up to about $4,650 average. At the same time, there's been a pretty reliable trend line down in terms of total volume of set sales. So if you look at Q1, about 140 sets total got sold, and by the end of the year, we were down at about 80 sets. So a slow decline there.
One thing I just want to remark here is it's interesting that we are still even talking about the market for this game. And I think 2023 was a pretty rough year for a lot of, CCGs. I think Magic didn't have a great year. Pokemon didn't have a fantastic year. There was just a lot of tightening in the collectibles market as people sort of made different choices of what to do with their disposable income. Everyone's back to work. They'd rather buy a jet ski than buy a Theed AI set, right, or whatever. So I think that it's interesting that the prices have kind of plateaued, but have not really dipped down too much.
Yeah, no, that's right. And if you look, I made up this other one. I'll come back to this one in a sec. But this is total sales volume over the last 2 years, and you see this is just a continuing, slight trend line down from 2022. So in 2023, I tracked a total of 450 sets. In 2022, there was a total of 500 sets. Compared to 2021, where it was over 800 sets sold. So 2021 was definitely, unsurprisingly, the peak in terms of total set sales, and since then things have just been trending down. But I do take it to be a good sign that the averages have not been declining in the same way.
Yeah, I think one thing with sets is, you kind of get a little bit of an echo chamber with collecting, where people get really excited by other people collecting and posting their mail days and saying, I just completed up to Death Star 2 or something. And that then feeds people's interest in completing their set. They only needed 6 more cards. And I think collecting can be this positive feedback loop that's formed by other people. And I think, I'm a part of several of these groups, as are you, and I just don't see that as much of people being excited about, like, finally got my last AI. Like, it seems like that enthusiasm has kind of dissipated a little bit as people have maybe fallen back into the doldrums of their normal life.
Yeah, that was rampant in 2020 and 2021. Just like every other day on the groups, you'd see people sharing this kind of thing. And I think you're right that just feeds into other people becoming more interested and motivated in finishing off their sets, or just buying sets that they needed to complete, their whatever they consider a master set, which for many of us changes over time. I'm just gonna get the OT sets and then I'm done. And it's like, okay, let me get the episode 1 sets. All right, let me get the foil sets. And then you end with the whiteboarders.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. I ended mine like I need all of the oversized cards, and I need them to
Yeah,
be
yeah, right.
unsigned oversized
Yeah,
cards. I'm
then
like,
it's the posters.
yeah, didn't do all the posters, but I did the oversized cards. Okay, but let's keep moving. So
Yeah, so now, so that was the year. Looking now more bigger picture, those same numbers, but now looking at the trends since I started collecting data in 2019. So at that point, all the black border sets, not including and not including foil. So this is again Premiere through Special Edition and/or Death Star 2, and then Tatooine, Coruscant, and Theed, and Reflections 2 and Reflections 3 Premium. That would have cost you about $2,000 in 2019, picking up a set at a time on average on eBay, up to about $4,000 in 2021. That actually peaked in 2022. We dipped in 2023 with a bit more bounce back in the last couple months of 2022. And that's, again, we're still in the $4,000 range. So we're still at a good 100% increase from where we were when I started.
yeah, it's interesting that you kind of saw a little. I mean, it just makes me wonder what 2024 is going to look like, and we visit this because I think with 2024 you're so clear of the COVID hurdle of that collecting bump that everybody saw, and I think that the COVID bump was a bit of a delayed bump as well, where it took people time to realize there was hype happening and collectibles writ large. And then that's why you saw that sort of delayed of impact where everyone was bored in 2021 and GameStop's popping off and AMC and all this crazy stuff. I miss
Yeah.
2021. What a great year.
Yeah, it's unclear. I mean, I dug into some of the data here to see like what accounted for this. It's not a incredibly significant drop, but what accounted for the drop from 2022 to 2023. And looking at the sets, Premiere, A New Hope, Dagobah, Cloud City, Jabba's Palace, Death Star 2 and Reflections 3 Premium all stayed roughly even in from 2022 to 2023. Hoth, Special Edition, Endor, Coruscant, and Theed Palace all took a hit. Hoth was minor. The ones on the bottom row were all within 5%. They weren't exactly even. Hoth was about an 8% drop. But Special Edition, Endor, Coruscant, and Theed all took a good like 15 to 20% hit from 2022 to 2023. And the two ones that are up, Tatooine and Reflections 2, are up about 5 to 10%. So nothing incredibly significant. But so the real explanation for that drop in the 2023 average is those 4 sets, Special Edition, Endor, Coruscant, and Theed, with really Coruscant and Theed making up the most of that. Especially because this bump that you see in the last couple months, Special Edition and Endor have actually increased again over the last couple months, whereas Coruscant and Theed have not really. So that, I think, remains the kind of explanation for the big drop this year.
I mean, I still hypothesize that selling sets, while it's neat and orderly for your brain to do, to finish a set and then sell it that way, it is not nearly as profitable as selling it as bundles or singles, right? Like, the singles in Coruscant are worth more than a set, but by probably 1.5 times.
Yeah, I mean, you mean like the mains in particular?
Yeah, like the mains. I mean, even like a common uncommon set's like $100, right? Or
Yeah. I mean, I certainly think it's the case that for any set, the sum of the individual cards is gonna be more than the average price of the set. But I think you're right that for sets like Coruscant and Theed, that seems to be more significant, right? So that so it becomes less of a good proposition to sell those as sets, just given how high value the singles are from those sets in particular compared to other sets. Yeah. But it is still, I'd still find it odd why the sets, just given how well those singles sell. I think your point is to say something like, it doesn't make sense to sell it as a set, right? But when people do sell it as a set, it is still a little surprising to me that it doesn't command more money, just given how much those singles go for.
I think what we're kind of the underlying undergirding factor here is there's both less supply and less demand, which is I think is the volume sold. Like certainly there's been some big sellers that have just kind of exited the marketplace, like someone like Brian Fred, who opened his own store up but was regularly selling sets
Yeah.
on eBay like every Sunday for like 2021, 2022. And I think that's sort of dissipated a little bit. So
The number
I
of sets that Brian Fred sold over the course of those few years still
yeah,
astounding.
right. He's like 20% of the data or something. I just think that like there's a little bit less supply and there's a little less demand. And, this channel doesn't have a big impact on the market or anything, but there are people that find, I think that all the organic ways of finding the game have kind of played out. And I'm not sure there's too many people being like, oh, I love this game in 1999. Let me find it again. I feel like that narrative has already happened. And we've got the players or we've got the collectors, and there's not a huge pool to draw from again, unless there's a ton of education that happens, or like some Logan Paul, influencer kind of thing happens.
Could you imagine? I'll be really upset that I've been selling off all of my my bulk recently if that's the case. um, Yeah, so maybe just a couple of points on this. Like, I don't know. I think it's nice to see Tatooine and Reflections 2 Premium doing well. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. That Reflections 2 I think has been, in particular, criminally undervalued for a while, and I always like to see it doing well. Tatooine as well. I think Tatooine's a nice set, given that both of these have relatively low price points, it's not shocking to see them go up, but it is nice to see them go up. Oh, here's another little factoid. We've talked about this before, but it continues to hold. I mean, Premiere still is like one of the top selling sets overall. Cloud City consistently is the top selling set of all the sets. It outsells Premiere and every other set. I mean, outsells every other set by a significant margin, and Premiere by a bit of a margin. It's like the workhorse of Star Wars CCG. It's really interesting.
I mean, it's a little less grim than Jabba's palace, right? And it's probably, just by volume, lots of it was printed. So I guess lots of it's out there. It makes sense that Premiere, I would guess Hoth and A New Hope are right there with it, just because they're also kind of iconic. But
they're much lower. I don't have my sheet in front of me right now. But I could check this really quickly. Yeah, A New Hope, Hoth, Dagobah are not that far behind Premiere. They're not that far behind. Cloud City is a bit ahead. Actually, turns out Jabba's Palace is the second highest selling set of all the sets. Now that I look at this.
I mean, they're good entry vehicles. I think one thing that the game has going for it is how cheap Premiere sets are, right? Like you can pick it up for 150, $200 or something. And it's just a lot less daunting than trying to pick up like a original set of most games, which is like hard to find. And so it's a good entry vehicle into all of this. That's why I tell people, if you want to get started, get a set of Premiere and get used to the cards and what they do, and then kind of go from there. That's probably the best way to do this.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think in Cloud City and especially Jabba's Palace, they're good sort of self-contained environments to play in. I know. I mean, I've played in some Jabba's Palace sealed deck tournaments and stuff like that, and so those. They're cheaper price points, so it's not shocking because they're easier to buy, but they're also just fun if you're looking for a kind of self-contained environment.
Yeah. They're not in the territory of like I have to report this to my significant other because I just like spent a mortgage payment on shiny cards that I swear are worth a bunch of money.
Yeah.
All right,
You try to explain your Reflections 3 or tournament foil purchase, and
right, exactly. It takes like a special type of. I mean, it's also the amount of disposable income required. It's just you're starting to get into a pretty small subset of buyers that have $2,000 of disposable income to spend on something like this. So it just narrows your pool quite a bit.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. The next one is the big master set chart. So this is not including Japanese cards, but this is every English language set, black border, white border, foil sets, including AI. you know, what many consider a master set, although the term is often disputed in the Facebook group and on the forums. In 2019, when I started tracking, this would have cost you about $5,000. Again, buying, you know, buy individual sets on eBay. It peaked in 2022 at about $15,000. And it dropped in 2023 to about, you know, 13.5K with a little bit of a bump at the end. And this big drop, you know, this is more of a drop than can be explained by, you know, Coruscant and Theed doing poorly. This is really Ref 2 and Ref 3 foil sets took a hit in 2023. I don't have a ton of data points. It's really just a handful for each at most. But, you know, Ref 2 was averaging close to 2,000 in 2022, and Ref 3 was averaging close to 3,000 in 2022, and those are down to about 1,300 and 2,200 respectively. Again, off of the back of, you know, 3 or 4 sales, but those have taken quite the hit in the last year as a set.
Yeah, it's still remarkable that they command that value, right? Like,
yes. Yeah,
I think with both of these, there is a floor, right? Like, you know, if someone posted a Reflections 3 set for $1,800, I think it'd be gone in like 20 minutes, right? Because that's just, there's still a floor. The floor is not like given out here, and it's not like these things are selling for pennies. It's like, oh, there's just maybe more of an equilibrium that's being reached.
Yeah, I mean, these are very expensive sets. And interestingly, Ref 2 foil, Ref 3 foil, and Coruscant and Theed were the sets that I think shot up the most percentage-wise, you know, during COVID and towards the peak. So like a lot of sets shot up about 100%, 150%. You know, these sets shot up like 300, 400, 500% in some cases. And so, you know, maybe they were undervalued at, you know, pre-COVID boom. But this could be, you know, they're still selling at, you know, I'd have to look up the data, but they're still selling at, you know, 200% or 300% of what their pre-COVID values were. So they're still selling, they've still had a more significant increase relative to their pre-COVID values than all the other sets, even after taking these hits.
Yeah. All right, let's see what else we got in store.
The last set of slides, so that's these are the sets, and then the last set of slides is just some single slides. So this is the Coruscant and Theed Palace AI. So this is just the average prices of the 9 AIs from each set. You know, they've held pretty well. When I started tracking these in 2021, Coruscant was sitting at a little over 1,200, and Theed was about 750. Theed is currently, or at least over the last 3 months, still at around 750. Coruscant has gone up a little bit. You know, I will say Coruscant is that price is highly determined and influenced by the fact that the Queen Amidala, ruler of Naboo, and the Darth Maul young apprentice each go for over $350. The rest of the Coruscant AIs are at around like $50 to $100 each, with the 2 other dark side ones, the Infiltrator and Phantom Menace, being the lowest value of the Coruscant AIs.
I really wish that you had 2019 on here, because I would just be so fascinated to see.
Yeah.
I would guess under $500 for, you know, Coruscant, and under 300 for Theed.
I think I do have some data on my spreadsheet about the price of the entire, every once in a while, the entire set of AIs as 9 cards would show up on eBay back in 2019. And I think I have a few data points for that in the spreadsheet. I'd have to dig in, but I wasn't tracking the singles until 2021. But I agree. I would like to know, because those also shot up quite a lot in 2019 or 2020.
I mean, I love the AIs. I think they're great, but you know, it's, once again, when things start, this is how supply and demand works, though. Like, prices go up and people start seeing this, are like, holy crap, my Coruscant AI is worth $1,200. Like, I'd rather have that $1,200 than 9 cards in a binder. And that's what drives markets, right? Prices go up, and that creates new sellers, and then, you know, buyers find value.
Yeah, I will say, like, I think I would have to run the numbers, but my intuition is that my the number of data points for this has dropped. So even though they're still doing reasonably well over the last, you know, reasonably steady over the last couple of years, I'm seeing fewer and fewer sales. Although I think one thing we talked about is that part of the explanation for that is that a lot of people are selling these, getting these graded and selling them as graded, which I don't include in my spreadsheet. And so that's taking away a lot of data for me.
Yeah, we'll chat about graded at the very end here.
Cool. So looking at the Death Star 2 ultra rares, these I did start tracking in 2019. And so, you see these were selling for about $120 each in 2019 and are now at about, double that. They've held pretty steady since 2021. They've both, Luke has taken a little bit of a hit. Emperor Palpatine has held a bit more steady. They're now, there's a little bit of a difference, but they're roughly equivalent, sitting at around $220 now each. And tons of data points. These still sell. Of the singles I track, they sell more regularly than anything else I track.
Yeah, I sort of think of these as like the bonds.
Yeah,
like the bonds.
These two ultra rares, are great investments, I think. And I don't see them losing. I mean, Luke has been a little surprising recently, but I don't see it taking any more significant of a hit than it has, really.
No.
Looking at the Reflections 1 foils, you see what would otherwise be kind of roughly steady chart, other than Vader, who like flew up in 2022 for a little while and then now is back down. And Luke took a bit of a hit. I mean, Luke and Vader took a hit in 2023. Luke has bounced back over the last couple months, again working with just a handful of data points though, so we'll have to see where that goes. I don't, all of these singles, I get far fewer data points on them, and so I don't like to make predictions about some of these trends working off of 3 to 5 data points. But Luke seems to be bouncing back a little bit from that sub 100 hit he took for a while.
For a long time, that Farm Boy Luke foil was the most valuable card I had in my collection as a kid. I pulled it from a Reflections box. It has a special place in my heart.
I don't even remember what, in my early days of collecting, and even when I got back into it, I would just get rid of every foil that came my way. In fact, I was getting rid of foils to basically make back the money I was spending on buying my other car, building my collection. I was like, oh, who needs these foils? Luckily, I corrected that mistake before they got too pricey.
All right, let's wrap up with the slides.
So I got just 2 more here. So the Reflections 2 foils have actually taken a bit of a hit. I think more so than any of the other singles I track since their peak in 2022, where Luke was 375, Palpatine was almost 350, Vader was close to 200, Mara never really peaked that much. They've all just slowly declined. They declined in 2023, and they've continued to decline over the last couple months. So I don't have a great explanation for why they are like that in the face of, less of a decline with other singles. And, when we get to these Reflections 3, the Reflections 3 foils have remained, quite steady. The Qui-Gon Jinn, the 3PO, are sitting at around 250 each. The P-59, 250, 270. Darth Maul around 800. And again, they've fluctuated a little bit, but they've remained quite steady, as opposed to these Reflections 2 ultra foils, which for whatever reason seem to be sliding.
Yeah, I don't really know why. I mean, I think we can talk graded a little bit. I do think there's something to be said about people are seeking these cards out to grade. And, because they're seeking premium cards, you've almost bifurcated the market, because you're not tracking condition, right? So some of these could have been Luke and played condition, right? And
I make judgment calls when I'm adding stuff to the spreadsheet, and I tend to leave off things that are obviously played. This is my data. All the data you see is at the whim of whatever Greg is feeling at the moment. But I try not to include played sets or played singles, because they do drastically affect the data, and I just have to make some judgment calls sometimes about what to include and what to not include. But these should not be being dragged down by including played sales. And I think your point about graded is interesting and correct. I just don't know what to make of the fact that some of these other singles don't seem to be affected in the same way. I'm kind of at a loss there. If anyone watching has hypotheses, I would love to hear them.
Yeah, I mean, the Maul's always going to command a huge value, just because that's an iconic card that I think it's the best looking card in the game, to be honest. But that's my own personal bias. You know, one could own 4 of those and think it's cool. I don't really know if anyone wants 4 P59s.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you about them all, other than, of course, Force Lightning foil,
Yeah,
which is,
no, also a very
objectively
cool
speaking.
card. So let's come back here and just chat a little bit about 2024. So we wrapped up 2023. I'm curious, any prognoses for 2024? I think this is going to be a really interesting year for the collectibles market, which I've said this before, but collectibles follow, you know, stock market, and especially what I would classify as like dumb money markets, things like crypto. Like if Bitcoin goes to 10,000 or 100, whatever, 100,000, you're going to see people with like cash that are like, what if I got back into my old hobbies? Right. And that sort of actually tracked well with 2022 when crypto was going insane. People just had money to spend on other stuff. Right. And, you know, if some of this stuff sort of happens again where people are just flush with cash, then I think you're going to see an increase in price again. And I think 2024 is going to be a really weird economic year. So I actually think 2024 is going to be better than 2023 for the market. But
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested as well, and I don't really know what to think either. I mean, certainly the trends have been, as we saw, the trends have been down in terms of total sales frequency. Although, again, one of the things that we've talked about in previous videos is to what degree that's explained by the rise of graded singles in the market, taking away from certain kinds of sales. And of course, as we said, people have just completed their sets. I agree. I think things can go up again. I mean, unless some really weird things occur, I doubt we're going to see the kind of boom we saw. You've said this a lot, that like people are just not finding their collections in their garages and their basements and their attics anymore. Like that, those days I think are over. And so I think that kind of boom is just, we're very, very, very unlikely to see that kind of thing going on again.
Yeah, I think the point I always remind myself though with all of this is even a set like the Thebe Palace that was short printed with only 50,000 boxes printed, that's still a lot of cards.
Yeah.
That's still a lot of booster packs. That's still a lot of product out there, and
Look, Matt, if you break me into Andy Talaga's house, I will open up every single one of those boxes and get those cards on the market.
Okay. Andy, if you're watching this, let's change your locks, man. Yeah, I think graded is a really interesting thing to throw in this as well. I think that the graded market's growing. I think people are interested in it, but I still think the premium graded market is growing. I don't think anyone has an interest for 7s and below, really even 8s. It's all about the 9s and 10s. Yeah. And if you get back a PSA return and it's an 8, you might as well crack it open, right? Like I actually submitted a bunch and I got a 7 Emperor foil back, and I'm just going to crack this and say it's light played, and I sold it. This card is light played. It is more. It's going to be an easier sale for someone who wants this in a deck and doesn't mind that it has minor white on the side rather than trying to sell a PSA 7 Emperor or something.
Yeah, I've thought about, I've chatted with some of you about this, about whether to include 7s or 8s just in my data, just assuming they're roughly equivalent to raw. I haven't yet, but it's something I've thought about, because I think you're right. The 9s and the 10s go for premium. 7s and 8s don't really seem to go for much more than what my spreadsheet is telling me.
Yeah, possibly even less, because people can't even use them in decks. It's just like, just a card that's sitting on a shelf. You can't put it in a binder, but
you have a much smaller market for those, because now you're only selling to people who are looking for graded cards. Yeah, and how many of them want a 7? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in closing, I'll say that I am really optimistic about this game, and I think that finally the table is set for this, right? Like, you have resources like GEMP, you have the PC running probably better than it's ever run as far as donations coming in and resources available. You have tons of robust groups, whether it's Reddit, Discord, Facebook. You have community there that you probably couldn't find. The only place you could find it's like a HTML, forum that's like 5 years ago. You have stores like Category 1 Games and, other resources that actually where you can buy singles easily. So I think all the signs are there that structurally the market's in a good place, and just because there's less volume being sold or prices are down a little bit doesn't necessarily mean that Star Wars CCG is dead. Long live Star Wars CCG, whatever. But like, I think that structurally the fundamentals are really good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I agree with your take on that as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, Greg, thanks for tuning in, man. Sorry I couldn't drink a drink with you. I'm doing a dry January and it's kind of lame. It's been a boring month so far.
No worries. If I had known, I would have drank 2 for you.
You can still, it's not too late. But thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.